So what do I think when I hear Indigenous sovereignty? Well, Indigenous sovereignty, as I understand it, relates to Indigenous people looking to have their rights and interests formally recognised in the legislation of a country. So in the Australian context, when Australia was occupied, it was done under a notion of terra nullius, which means land belonging to no one. And it wasn't until the Native Title Act was passed in Australia that notion of the land belonging to no one, when it was occupied by the British, was overturned. And I think as a subsequent step to that, Aboriginal people, when they talk about Indigenous sovereignty, are looking for a recognition that they have not only rights to land, I suppose their communities are governed, and the structures around that. They're looking for their independence from the standard governments of the country, so the Australian government, and looking to have their own rights and interests and government structures that then will determine their own state and their management of that state and the management of their people. Indigenous sovereignty can also relate to the way that Indigenous people are being educated. At the moment, many Indigenous people feel that the education being provided to their younger generations is very European focused, and that, you know, in their mind they have very strong educational requirements that relate to their own culture and the management of their land and the traditions of their people that are not being considered in the current educational structures, right down to the judicial system and how many Aboriginal people find themselves incarcerated. There are more traditional processes that Indigenous people feel that are appropriate outside of the prison system. And, through sovereignty and the establishment of their own rules and governing regulations, they'll be able to better manage some of the challenges that their young Indigenous people are finding themselves in the current regime of government roles and responsibilities in the state. Look, Indigenous sovereignty is an aspiration for many Indigenous people. I hope that one day there are segments of the community that recognise the importance of Aboriginal or Indigenous people having their own culture, their own systems and processes and laws. I know in Australia there's a very strong law process in the Australian Aboriginal communities where people that have done the wrong thing in the community are judged and then dealt with within the community structures, and they are actually quite effective in managing many of the issues that are facing Aboriginal communities. Indigenous sovereignty is an aspiration that state and many people might want to consider working towards, but it wouldn't be without its challenges.